When billionaire CEO David Sterling's paralyzed 6-year-old son wouldn't stop screaming during the most important board meeting of his career, a homeless 8-year-old girl with dirt in her fingernails and holes in her shoes somehow slipped past 3 layers of security, marched into that glass-walled conference room, and did something that left 15 executives speechless and changed 2 families forever. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. Now let's begin. The piercing wails echoed through the marble corridors of Sterling Industries' 42nd floor, each cry driving another nail into David's professional coffin. His son Noah had been inconsolable for 3 hours, and the merger with Johnson Corp., worth $2.3 billion and 2 years of negotiations, hung by a thread. The Japanese investors had already walked out. The board members exchanged meaningful glances. David's grip on his company, built from nothing after growing up in foster care, was slipping away with every heart-wrenching sob from his disabled son. Mrs. Patterson, Noah's private nurse, had tried everything: medication adjustments, comfort items, even calling Noah's therapist for an emergency phone session. Nothing worked. The 6-year-old boy, paralyzed from the waist down after the car accident that killed his mother 2 years ago, thrashed in his custom wheelchair, his face red and streaked with tears that seemed endless. "Perhaps we should reschedule," suggested Richard Chun, the lead investor, his patience clearly exhausted. "This environment isn't conducive to serious business discussions." David's jaw clenched. Rescheduling meant losing the deal. 3 competitors were circling like vultures, and Johnson Corp had made it clear this was their final offer. His empire, everything he'd built to ensure Noah would never want for anything, was crumbling because he couldn't calm his own son. The security breach happened so fast that nobody understood what they'd witnessed until it was over. A small figure in a faded yellow dress and mismatched sneakers somehow bypassed the lobby guards, slipped past the executive assistant, and burst through the conference room doors like she owned the place. "He's hungry," the girl announced to the room full of stunned billionaires. "That's why babies cry like that. My mama told me before she got sick." David stared at this impossible child who couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her tangled brown hair framing a face smudged with dirt, clutching a paper bag that smelled like French fries. Behind her, 3 security guards rushed in, radios crackling. "Sir, we're so sorry. She just..." "Wait." David held up his hand, because something extraordinary was happening. Noah's screaming had stopped. For the first time in hours, his son was quiet, staring at this strange little girl with the kind of attention he hadn't shown anything since the accident. The girl approached Noah's wheelchair without fear, reaching into her bag. "You want some fries? They're still warm. I was saving them for later, but you look sadder than me, and that's saying something." She held out a single French fry, golden and perfect. Noah, who hadn't eaten solid food in 2 days according to Mrs. Patterson, opened his mouth and accepted it. The room held its collective breath as she fed him another, then another, speaking to him in a gentle voice that somehow carried more authority than all the medical degrees and expensive treatments they tried. "There you go, little man. Sometimes when everything hurts on the inside, food helps the outside feel better. My mama used to say that." "What's your name?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lucy Chun," she replied, then looked directly at Richard Chun. "No relation to the scary man in the expensive suit, though we got the same last name. Funny how that works." Richard Chun's face went pale. Lucy continued feeding Noah, who was now calm and alert, actually making eye contact with her, something he rarely did with anyone anymore. 3 hours later, David discovered that Lucy Chun was living in her car with her terminally ill mother in the parking garage beneath his building. Her mother, Susan, had been working as a night janitor in the building until her cancer diagnosis 2 months ago. Unable to afford both rent and medical treatments, they'd been sleeping in their 1998 Honda Civic, surviving on food from soup kitchens and whatever Lucy could find. Lucy had been coming to the building every day, waiting for her mother to get better so she could return to work. She'd learned the security patterns, knew which guards were kind and which ones would chase her away. She'd seen Noah through the windows during his previous meltdowns and somehow understood what he needed before anyone else did. "She shouldn't be here," Mrs. Patterson whispered to David as they watched Lucy color with Noah in his private playroom. "It's not appropriate. The liability issues alone." She got him to eat, David interrupted. In 3 hours, she accomplished what we haven't managed in 3 months. But the situation was more complicated than David initially realized. Lucy's mother had been hiding the extent of her illness. The cancer had progressed rapidly, and the doctors gave her weeks, maybe days. Lucy had been taking care of her mother alone, bringing her food, helping her to the bathroom, making sure she took her pain medication. An 8-year-old girl, carrying responsibilities that would crush most adults. When David met Susan Chun in the sterile hospital room, where she'd finally been admitted, he saw where Lucy got her strength. Even dying, Susan radiated a fierce love for her daughter and a determination that took his breath away. She's special, your little girl, David told Susan. What she did for Noah, it was miraculous. Susan's eyes filled with tears. Lucy sees things differently than other people. Always has. She can tell what someone needs just by looking at them. But Mr. Sterling, when I'm gone, she'll have nowhere to go. No family. The state will put her in foster care. And Lucy, she won't survive that system. She's too sensitive, too trusting. The weight of what Susan was asking settled on David's shoulders. This dying woman was entrusting her most precious possession to a man she'd met 3 days ago, because her daughter had shown kindness to his son. 6 months later, the impossible had become routine. Lucy officially lived with David and Noah in their Boston mansion, navigating a world of private tutors, servants, and technology she'd never dreamed of. But wealth, David learned, couldn't solve every problem. Lucy suffered from nightmares about her mother's death. She hoarded food in her room, terrified of being hungry again. She jumped at loud noises and cried when David raised his voice, even when he wasn't angry at her. The trauma of watching her mother die, of living in poverty, had left invisible scars that no amount of money could heal. Noah, meanwhile, had become completely dependent on Lucy. She was the only person who could calm him during his panic attacks. She somehow knew when he was in pain before he could articulate it himself. She talked to him about his mother, David's deceased wife Elena, in ways that suggested she understood grief from personal experience. But Lucy was still a child dealing with her own trauma, and the responsibility of caring for Noah's emotional needs was too much for someone her age. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning when David found Lucy collapsed in the kitchen, unconscious from exhaustion. She'd been awake for 2 nights straight because Noah was having nightmares, and she refused to let anyone else comfort him. "I can't leave him alone," she sobbed when she woke up in the hospital. "His mama is gone, and my mama is gone. And if I'm not there, he'll think I left him too." Dr. Harrison, the child psychologist David had hired, was blunt in her assessment. Lucy is experiencing survivor's guilt, complicated grief, and she's parentifying herself with Noah. She believes she's responsible for everyone's happiness. This isn't healthy for either child. "What do you suggest?" David asked. "Therapy for both of them, separately and together. Lucy needs to process her mother's death and learn that she's not responsible for Noah's emotional well-being. Noah needs to develop coping mechanisms that don't rely entirely on Lucy." But there was another issue Dr. Harrison hesitated to mention. The resemblance between Lucy and Elena, David's deceased wife, was remarkable. Not just physical, though they both had the same delicate features and expressive brown eyes, but in mannerisms, in the way Lucy tilted her head when listening, in her laugh. "I'm concerned," Dr. Harrison said carefully, "that you might be projecting your grief about Elena onto Lucy, that you're seeing your wife in this child, and that's influencing your decisions." The accusation hit David like a physical blow because part of him recognized its truth. Sometimes, when Lucy smiled a certain way or touched her hair, his heart would stop. The resemblance was so strong, it was almost supernatural. The truth came out in the most unexpected way. David was going through Elena's old belongings, preparing to donate them to charity, when he found a letter he'd never seen before. It was dated 3 weeks before Elena's death, addressed to him but never sent. "My darling David," the letter began, "there are things I never told you about my family, about my past. I had a sister, younger than me, who I lost touch with years ago. Her name was Susan, and she was pregnant when I last saw her. I've been thinking about her lately, wondering if she ever had her baby, if I'm an aunt somewhere in the world. If anything happens to me, please try to find her. I regret not reaching out sooner. David's hand shook as he read on. Elena described growing up in foster care, being separated from Susan when they were teenagers, never learning what happened to her younger sister. The letter was full of regret about family connections lost, about not being brave enough to search for the only blood relative she had left. A DNA test confirmed what David already suspected in his heart. Lucy was Elena's niece. Susan had been Elena's lost sister, the one who'd somehow found her way to David's building in her final days, though she never knew the connection. When David shared this revelation with Lucy, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Mama used to dream about a sister who got adopted by good people. She always wondered what happened to her." "Did she know?" David asked. "Did she know Elena was your aunt when she brought you to me?" Lucy shook her head. "Mama was too sick to remember much at the end. But maybe somewhere inside, she knew I belonged here." 2 years after Lucy first walked into that conference room, David faced the biggest challenge yet. Child Protective Services had received an anonymous complaint about Lucy's living situation. Someone had reported that a billionaire was keeping an unrelated homeless child in his house under suspicious circumstances. The social worker, Ms. Rodriguez, was professional but thorough. She interviewed Lucy alone, examined her room, spoke with her tutors and therapist. David's lawyer assured him that the adoption paperwork was in order, that Lucy was legally his daughter now, but David could see doubt in Ms. Rodriguez's eyes. "Lucy is clearly well cared for materially," Ms. Rodriguez told David during her final interview. "But I'm concerned about the psychological dynamics here. A wealthy man loses his wife, then takes in a child who resembles her. It raises questions about motivation." "Lucy is my family," David said firmly. "Elena's family. She belongs here." "That may be true, but the court will want to ensure that Lucy's best interests are being served, not just your emotional needs." The hearing was scheduled for the following week. David hired the best family law attorney in the state, but he knew that wouldn't be enough. He needed Lucy and Noah to testify about their relationship, about their family. The night before the hearing, Lucy climbed into David's study where he was reviewing legal documents. "Daddy," she said. She started calling him that 6 months ago, and it still made his heart skip. "Are they going to take me away?" David pulled her onto his lap, this brave little girl who'd saved his son and healed his broken family. "I won't let that happen, sweetheart. I promise." "What if the judge doesn't believe we're really family?" Lucy asked. David thought about Elena's letter, about Susan's dying words, about the miraculous way Lucy had appeared in their lives exactly when they needed her most. "We'll tell them the truth," he said. "That families aren't just about blood or paperwork. They're about showing up for each other, about love, about choosing to stay even when things get hard." The courtroom was smaller than David expected, less intimidating, but somehow more intimate. Judge Williams was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened as David's attorney presented the case. The DNA evidence proving Lucy's relationship to Elena, the psychological evaluations showing healthy attachment patterns, the documentation of Lucy's progress in therapy. Ms. Rodriguez presented her concerns professionally, but firmly. The unusual circumstances, the quick adoption, the potential for unconscious manipulation of a grieving child. Then it was time for Lucy to speak. She walked to the witness stand with quiet dignity, wearing a blue dress David had bought her and the small golden locket that had belonged to her mother. When the judge asked her to state her name, Lucy's voice was clear and strong. "My name is Lucy Elena Sterling," she said, using the middle name she'd chosen to honor her aunt. "I live with my daddy and my brother Noah." "Lucy," Judge Williams said gently, "can you tell me about your family?" Lucy looked directly at the judge. "My first mama died when I was 8. She was sick for a long time, but she took care of me until she couldn't anymore. Before she died, she brought me to Daddy because she knew I could help Noah." "Help him how?" "Noah was sad because his mama died too, and sometimes when people are really sad, they forget how to be happy. But I know about being sad, so I could teach him how to be happy again." The judge leaned forward. "And what about your daddy? How does he take care of you?" Lucy's face lit up. "He makes sure I'm not hungry, and he reads to me every night. And when I have nightmares about Mama, he sits with me until I'm not scared anymore. He teaches me things and takes me to doctor appointments and bought me a bicycle with training wheels even though I'm probably too old for training wheels." "And you want to stay with them?" Yes, Lucy said without hesitation. Noah needs me, and Daddy needs both of us, and we're a family. Not the regular kind, but the kind that chooses each other. When Noah was called to testify, David's heart clenched. His son, now 8 years old and walking with braces thanks to months of intensive physical therapy that Lucy had somehow motivated him to attempt, made his way slowly to the witness stand. Noah, Judge Williams said gently, Lucy isn't your biological sister. Do you understand what that means? Noah nodded. It means she wasn't born of my mama, but she's still my sister because she takes care of me and loves me. And sisters don't have to come from the same mama. And if Lucy had to go live somewhere else, how would that make you feel? Noah's eyes filled with tears. It would be like losing mama all over again. Lucy is the reason I learned to walk again. She's the reason I'm not scared anymore. If she goes away, I think the scared will come back. The judge was quiet for a long moment, then addressed David directly. Mr. Sterling, I've reviewed all the evidence in this case. The DNA test confirms that Lucy is your late wife's biological niece, which provides a legal basis for kinship adoption. The psychological evaluations show healthy attachment patterns and no signs of manipulation or coercion. Both children clearly view themselves as siblings and you as their father. David held his breath. However, Judge Williams continued, I want to be absolutely clear about my reasoning. This decision isn't based solely on biological connection or financial stability. It's based on the evidence that you've created a genuine family unit built on love, mutual support, and emotional healing. She looked directly at Lucy. Lucy, your mother made an extraordinary decision when she brought you to Mr. Sterling. She recognized that you had something special to offer his son, and that he could provide the security and love you needed. That kind of intuition, that mother's wisdom, deserves to be honored. David felt tears streaming down his face as Judge Williams rendered her decision. The adoption petition is approved. Lucy Elena Sterling, you are hereby legally and permanently a member of the Sterling family. 5 years later, David stood in the same conference room where Lucy had first appeared, but now it had been converted into something completely different. The Sterling Foundation for Family Healing occupied the entire 42nd floor, and what had once been a sterile business space was now warm and welcoming, filled with comfortable furniture, children's artwork, and the sound of laughter. Lucy, now 13 and poised beyond her years, was presenting her research project to a room full of social workers, therapists, and adoption specialists. Her topic, how children navigate grief and build new families after loss. When my mom died, Lucy told the audience with the same direct honesty that had always defined her, I thought my whole world was ending. But what I learned is that families can be created, not just born. Love isn't something you inherit. It's something you choose every single day. Noah, now 11 and walking independently with only minor assistance, watched his sister with pride. He'd become an advocate for disabled children in the foster care system, speaking at conferences about the importance of seeing beyond physical limitations. David watched his children, both of them, legally and emotionally as children, and marveled at the journey that had brought them together. The Sterling Foundation had helped hundreds of families navigate adoption, grief counseling, and disability support. Lucy's story had inspired legislation protecting children aging out of foster care. Noah's recovery had revolutionized pediatric rehabilitation protocols. But more than their public achievements, David treasured the quiet moments. Lucy still had nightmares sometimes, and David still sat with her until she felt safe. Noah still needed extra support during stressful times, and Lucy still somehow knew exactly what to say. They were still healing, all three of them, but they were healing together. That evening, as had become their tradition, they visited Elena's and Susan's graves together. David had moved Susan's remains to the family plot, next to Elena, so the sisters could finally be reunited. Lucy placed sunflowers on both graves, Elena's favorite flower, which had somehow also been Susan's favorite, though the sisters had been separated for over a decade before their deaths. Do you think they know? Lucy asked, as she always did. Do you think they know we found each other? David looked at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who'd walked into their lives when they needed her most, who'd brought healing and hope and unconditional love. I think they planned it, he said, as he always did. I think somehow, They made sure you found your way to us. Noah reached for both their hands, and they stood together in the evening light, a family forged not by genetics or legal documents, but by choice, by need, by the mysterious ways that love finds its way to where it's needed most. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that families come in all forms, please like and subscribe for more stories about love, healing, and the extraordinary ways people find each other when they need it most. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that choose each other. See you in the next video.